right, finally, there we go. So here is the marketing ad we're putting out for the iOS Bootcamp. Again, we're targeting it towards business folks here in town or full-time developers at local firms that requested it, as well as students that have been through this course and wanted a kind of a boot camp scenario. They heard me talk about it because I've been to a number of them. Mainly boot camps are intensive type of courses to where you're kind of like one-on-one with the instructor for about 6 to 8 hours a day, and we're going to be doing it for 4 Saturdays in a row. We'll feed you that Saturday as well. But here's what we're going to be covering. It's a little bit more probably intermediate advanced level, one step further from this course as far as full packages of apps each Saturday you'll be completing. So I put it on the course description. Students have asked for the course for about 2 years, over 2 years actually. We'll be meeting 4 Saturdays and creating some popular mobile apps. The categories of apps that students will be creating are gaming, maps, GPS, using backend database, and audio video apps. You'll get a 3-ring binder with all the tutorials along with the DVD source code, references, and video tutorials. No text is required. And the time span is May 23rd through June 14th, and 4 Saturdays, 7:30 to 1:30 in this class. The topics we'll be covering on the first Saturday is game basics with SpriteKit. iOS 8 just released recently a new version of SpriteKit, updated version. We'll create a Tetris type game with a point and shoot game with enemies. And then secondly, on the second Saturday, May 30th, we'll create maps with MapKit, creating a driving directional map using pinpoints and GPS. Third Saturday, June 6th, creating a backend database using parse.com and core data, creating a chat messaging app using Facebook login API and parse.com. And then the last Saturday, create a video recording app using OpenTalk and Apple iOS features for video rendering. We'll create an app like FaceTime or Skype. And then this is one of the apps, actually will be a screenshot of the app where you basically take a video and then apply a filter post video. Like this one, I applied a grayscale upstairs in room 220, and that was the outcome of a grayscale video. And it saves it in your local video file on the iOS device. iOS Marketing Summer Session 2, it's online. Registration's already begun. June 15th through August 5th is the date frame on that. No textbooks required. We'll be using Swift again. The topics on that for 8 weeks will be: what is mobile marketing, why market my app, methods of marketing an app, stages of Apple developer registration, where I'll walk you through from beginning to end how to register as an Apple developer, some of the pitfalls I've learned over the years. They do change it pretty much every year. Some things they require of you. Then preparing app for publishing, dealing with that with icons specifically and the name of your app, because that's the 2 big things they look at. And then publishing the app to the App Store. Post-marketing, we'll deal with Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and pushing your app on those areas once it's on the App Store. And some of the guidelines Apple gives us to follow. If we don't follow the guidelines, they can pull our app from the App Store, both as an individual developer or a business developer, either one. And there have been some big name guys that have actually had their apps pulled from the App Store because they didn't market it correctly. So big on marketing, as you can probably imagine. And then tools to track downloads. There's a couple free tools we're going to be looking at that week that I use to track downloads. So you can see, like if I had 5 people download an app from China, I can see that they downloaded it, or downloaded it from here in Rockford or wherever. And it tells you what time of day they downloaded it, other interests that they have on their profile, which is interesting because you can take that information, and the way I use it is I actually email the folks that buy it and ask them about a month down the road if they're satisfied or any features they'd like to see, which you really don't get a lot with developers today. You have to actually email them first. And then sometimes you don't hear back. And so I try to be proactive in that. And so Apple allows you to do that, by the way, because when you register as an Apple developer or as an Apple in iTunes with your iCloud account, one of the disclaimers is they can contact you to find out if you'd like to participate in quality control type of things. And so that's one of the things that they allow you to do as a developer. Again, a lot of shops don't do it, but I show you how I do it. And these are all personal things I've learned in marketing that I'll give to you, all latest and greatest stuff. And by that time, actually, I'll just get finished up publishing an app for a local business here in town that I've been working on an app of theirs for a year and a half, Stenstrom Construction. On their petroleum side, they own a lot of the gas stations here in town. And so I'll be coming right out of that and be able to share kind of the pitfalls we've learned, some of the, positive things, some of the negative things as far as the submission of the app. Because they're always changing it. Apple's always changing it each time I submit an app. Even if it's only 6 months apart, they change something on what they require, what they need you to do. But they are really good about giving you those requirements and examples, boatload of examples to show you. So it's not like you're out in the dark on what to do. No, you don't have to. No, they do. I have had them email me and say, hey, you need to look at this image and update it because of our new requirements. And they give you some time frame to do it, as far as like, say it's a thumbnail on their store that they've changed, how they do things. That's an example I can think of, because they changed the rendering of the dimensions that shows up on the iPad and iPhone, especially when the iPhone 6 came out. It's different dimensions. And then the last one on Summer Session 2, it's this course again for online. And if you want to help push that out, that'd be awesome. And so 3 courses for the summer. Boot camp, which I'm excited to offer. Working a lot of hours putting that together, especially on the binder that you'll get. And then the iOS marketing app. This is the 3rd summer I've offered that. And again, anything I can help share with you that I've learned, I'll give you that information. And then the online course for Summer Session 2. Questions on any of the 3 courses I'm offering for the summer? So if you aren't interested, I appreciate if you could push it out, help me push it out for my courses to get more numbers. That'd be awesome. Through social media, Facebook, Twitter, would be great. And if you have any questions, you send me after class or email me. Last week we looked over managing local external files using PDFs. You were to create an app, 3 PDFs local, 3 PDFs external, or implement it in your final app. This week we're going to focus on what's called NS user defaults. It's basically used in an app to save app preferences. An example would be time zone, app username, password, really not so much password, but we'll use a username password in this example tonight. Profile, app-centric user-specific things like colors, things of that nature. So zip code would be one maybe as well. So what is NS user defaults? Glad you asked. It's a class that allows simple storage of different data types. It's ideal for small bits of information you need to persist between app launches and device restarts. So we've all had this on our apps. If you've not noticed it, you have. When you start an app, it might say enter in your birthday, possibly. It might, and it saves that information as preferences. It might say enter in your username, and it saves that in preferences. That way you don't have to enter it each time you launch the app. It remembers it. NS user default supports the following data types: NS string, number, date, array, dictionary, and data. The one that probably doesn't make sense, maybe out of the box, would be the data. That's more for like pictures and images. NS data is generally used for images and pictures. Like a profile picture you might save on an app would be an NS data type on core data. It's also the NS data type for NS user defaults. When do you use NS user defaults? It should be used again to store small amounts of data, like user default, cities, zip, preference. So the next time they open up the app, they don't need to enter it again. In this case, the other one's a good one is the marking coaches, coach marks. Coach marks, when you start an app up, it has little coach marks, right, to show you how the app works. And, if you're like me, you don't want to see it again, but maybe one time. And so you can check something that says, I don't want to see this again. That saves it in preferences. It's not doesn't need to be a core data thing. It's just a preferences that's going to immediately be recognized when the app runs. Does that make sense? Same with time zone. That would be a good one. in the correct time zone. Now, granted, on all iOS devices, you shouldn't have to do that because it's going to recognize your time zone just by being an iOS apple.time.com URL, but it could be. That'd be one of the preferences. So in this case, it would be overkill to store this type of data in core data or other complex mechanisms, like say, going into parse.com or something as a backend database. It's just overkill. You don't need to do it. Preferences, NS user default preferences works perfectly for what we're talking about this week. And all of your apps, for the most part, use preferences, either little or much, but at least some type of preferences are safe. Can anybody think of an app that you use that uses preferences, and what type of preferences is it you can remember? You don't have to be exact on what type of preferences the app's asked to save. Can anybody think of one? Think of an example?
Maybe like any games you use?
Yeah, anything. It don't matter. Don't matter what it is. There you go. Sound on and off. Good example. So if you play games and you want to sound off all the time, it could be a preference to keep that off all the time, and it always stays off until you change the preference again, right? Any other examples you can think of?
Notifications.
Notifications is a good example. That will be set in preferences as well using NS user defaults. It's not a big data thing, so it doesn't need to be overkill into core data or any other type of database. So we'll talk about some don'ts at the end of this tonight, but good examples. Anybody can think of other examples of NS user defaults or preferences on apps? We talked about sound so far. We talked about loading an app and determining if sound should be turned on or turned off. Loading an app and determined on maybe location, where you're at, stations that you like to keep on a radio station app type of thing as a static default, loading all the time might be an example. Websites, yeah, there you go. Websites would be an example of an NS user default, like Safari web browser. There you go. Bookmarks is an example. Bookmarks is an example of NS user defaults. All right, it's not stored in a database on Safari, it's stored in NS user defaults. And as you find out tonight, it's very easy to save and load NS user defaults. And you can save complex data if you want to. You probably just wouldn't do it that way. You would probably just use it for data that's not complex, but something that's going to be loaded every time the app runs for user preferences. Nope, no database. It's actually built into the OS. It's app-centric to the app name on the device. So whatever the app name is, .NS user defaults, whatever the name of the field is, if that makes sense.
So just storing it in like a flat file.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. There is a file structure it uses, much like plist on the project, the plist file, if you've looked at that. It's kind of like that. You don't have access to this list, but it's like that. It's like that, right? It's like the row and column type of thing. So it simply checks the NS user defaults, every app does when it loads a value to see if it's there. It's important to remember that NS user defaults are just that. They're helpful for reading and writing user preferences and other similar things. But it's good to know how to do it because almost every app in your final app will have it, I'm guessing, of some type. So to initialize NS user defaults, before we can read or write anything with NS user defaults, we need to initialize with a reference the NS user defaults class. And here's a line you could use to do that. Let prefs equal NS user defaults dot standard user defaults. That line now has initialized prefs as a standard NS user defaults. And now we can use prefs, which remember the word let is something that's static. You can't change this. It's not a variable item. It's a static constant that we're using here. And so we're going to gather now from this one line in prefs all the contents of NS user defaults, whatever those contents might be. Once we've referenced and we're ready to save some data to that constant and write it, we can then define both the value and the key and store it. So we would use prefs.setValue, and let's say we have on our form our view zip.txt, maybe in a text file, a text field. And so that's the name of the actual object. It wouldn't have quotes in it, by the way. Comma, and then 4-key in quotes, zip would be the actual name of the field name that you want to call it. Okay, and you notice this one is, because of its nature being a zip file, a text file, it's going to say this as what type, because it's a text file. A TEXT, what type of data type you think it's going to be? A string, right? And so it's going to know natively by inheriting the string type of the zip field that it's a string. The code then will save this value to the key named zip in NS user defaults, is what it would do.
Now, you said the zip.text
shouldn't need it in quotes. No, I did a little typo thing there. It would not be in quotes. Nope, because it's an actual object. But zip would be, you're right. Mike, on the right, there, zip would be in quotes, but the actual text, originally on this example, I had in there just like a name in there for set value, like zip, but I decided to put .txt, but I forgot to get rid of the quotes. But because you wouldn't have a quotes in there because it's an actual object. So it would know what you're typing in.
So zip.text.
Zip.text, right.
Already been defined as a string.
Right, on the actual view.
Putting a fixed string in there.
Yeah. Well, whatever you've typed in the zip.text field, right? So say you typed in there 61114, that's going to go into the 4-key zip value.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Where if it has the quotes, it would just put in zip.text.
It would, you're right. The way it looks now, it would put just in zip.text. Exactly. But if it was an actual object on the form, you would get rid of the quotes, and that would use the contents of what the user put in. Now to read the data from NS user defaults, this goes back to one of the first slides there. Say this was in a load command, right, on your form. So you maybe put this in the form load of the app, that view. The view did load. And the view did load is going to load, say, this line that's going to load all the user default preferences. And then what you would do is reference those one by one, but before you do that, you need to check to see if there's anything in there. So here's an example before we read it. If let city equals pref.string 4-key zip, print the user has zip city. Else, meaning nothing was in there, you're going to store something in there. In this case, it would be text zip.zip 4-key zip. And so if they do have something, it loads it. If it doesn't have something, it saves it. In this case here.
Does that mean?
Go ahead.
That it has a value in zip?
That it has a value in zip, right. If it has a value in zip, it would fill up city, and then it would say this user has zip whatever city 61114. We'll say. So if zip had a contents of 61114, this will be 6114 on the print ln, the print line. But it could actually be filled in on an actual text field as well on the form. But this is just a print line I'm using here. In the example tonight, you actually have a name field, a password field, a switch, not a switch, a turn object, and that's it. So it loads name, username, and what color you've chosen, I think, something like that.
So does it fail if zip isn't?
If it failed on the first one, meaning it looked for zip and it didn't see anything, it was nil, NIL, it would go to the else path and put something in there, whatever you had in that text box for zip. So some don'ts, you would not want to save sensitive data. Now tonight's example, I do have putting in there a password, but one of the reasons I use password tonight is to show you in the password field how you can hide the keys, to put the little dots in there instead of the actual characters. So that's one of the reasons why I use the password field tonight. But technically, you wouldn't use a password as an NS user default field. Wouldn't want anything secure saved in there. Wouldn't want social security number saved in there. Wouldn't want any banking information saved in there. Because it could be hacked into. It could be hacked into. Say connect to an iTunes account or whatever. It is all open text, and so make sure anything you use for NS user defaults is a non-secure data, non-sensitive data. So data stored in this NS user defaults is plain text, and it can easily be read by anyone with half a brain and iTunes cable, basically, because you can just connect it to iTunes and then see everything as it's coming through from iTunes. You need, if you need to persist usernames, passwords, or other sensitive data, you can use Keychain, but I would probably use Core Data instead of Keychain, because Keychain can actually be hacked into as well. Seriously, you don't store sensitive data in any NS user default field. Now tonight, we're going to do an app that does name, password, and choose a color from a color wheel, and that's it. Okay, but technically you wouldn't do probably username or password. Color would be okay, but I just show you a couple things in tonight's is not only learning NS user defaults, but how to do the password field and how to use one of the wheels that you have not used yet, and load contents in a wheel in an app for color array. Yeah.
So if you have more than one device, can that persist through
Just that one device. Nope, it won't. It'll exist on that one app install on that device. That's it. So it doesn't carry over at all. No, not at all. Don't store large files in NS user defaults. Technically, you can do it, but it's not efficient because it takes longer to load. A larger file example would be you wouldn't want to store a large picture file or something that's megs in size or something. I don't know, as an example. You might want to store that in a core data file or something possibly. So say if you had a form on your app called profile, which a lot of apps do, the text wouldn't take up much room, but the picture might take up a lot of room. So it might store all that in a core data. Does that make sense? Instead of storing it in NS user defaults. NS user defaults, I mentioned to Mike earlier, does store data like a property list file. The entire file is read and written out when you access it. If the file or data barely changes, you may be wasting resources accessing it that way. Meaning, the whole purpose behind NS user defaults is static data. It's going to be static and it's not going to change. Now, an example might be the on and off sound thing might change a lot on a game. But again, it's not something that you're doing every second, like you would be for something like core data maybe, or every minute or every hour or whatever. It's a place and mechanism for everything, the NS user defaults. For small bits, I guess the key words here is small bits of data or information that you haven't already invested some of your time in. We've learned core data a little bit already, but core data basically is going to be for the larger bits of data, the more secure bits of data. What we're talking about tonight is for the small bits, insecure data that's on your app. So this is just another example here of what I showed earlier. Let's go to this one. So what do we went over that one last week? So what I need you to do for the in-class is go to week 10, and if you haven't already done so, go ahead and fork and clone week 10 to your local Mac. And then I'll walk around and see if everybody has that done. Then we'll kind of go over the code together. Everybody get that? Need help? Just have to save. Yeah. Select like green. Select green. Select green or something, or select blue or something. I'll load it again. There you go. Good. If it doesn't come up, press the Command K button on your keyboard. It'll simulate it. Command K. If your keyboard does not come up, by the way, guys, when you go into a text field, hit the Command K and it'll bring up that simulated keyboard like it's supposed to do, like it would do on your iPad or iPhone. All right, everybody get that? Everybody need help on that? Is it working for you? Yay, nay? Yeah? How many's still working on it? Okay. Give you another moment or two here because I want to go over a couple more things. One is the password field, how I did that, before we go on to what you're doing for your homework this week. Good? Okay. So let's go, everybody, click on your main storyboard for me, and let's just click on one of the two, the password text field, the password text field. And what I want to make sure you select on the property is the Show Attributes Inspector, and scroll down till you see a checkbox for Secure Text Entry. Everybody see that? Secure Text Entry. It's right here. It's underneath the adjust to fit, capitalization, corrections, spell check, keyboard type, appearance, return key, secure text entry. Everybody see that? And I have it checked. That's all you need to do to put in the ... dots when you use a password field instead of the actual characters showing up. All right? And so the other thing I wanted to show you was, because some of your apps might have this, to where you only need users to enter in, say, a number or something. If you, and we're not going to do it for this one, but I wanted to show you that you could. If you click on the keyboard type, right now it says default. Notice all the different types of keyboard you can load. What that means is when the user hit this text field, it will only pop up those types of keyboards. So an example, if you only needed a number pad and you wanted to make sure they were only in numbers, use a number pad keyboard. Easy, right? And they did add this not too long ago, by the way, in iOS and Xcode, which is nice. Twitter, that's a new one. Web search, we'll add a web search bar. Decimal pad, we'll add a decimal pad with integer values. Name phone pad, I've not used that one yet. I'm guessing it's going to force you to put in a validated phone number. I've got a validated regex that I use. And then they also have email address. Validate, that's the email address they're putting in. A valid email syntax anyway. So whatever at whatever dot whatever. It's going to validate that. So these are some things I wanted to show you as far as keyboards and also the security, which some of your apps are going to need for certain fields a numeric value. Like for instance, on the app itself for the iPad, the device itself, when you put the security code in, you only get a keyboard number, a keyboard for numbers. That's it. That's all you need. All right. Does that make sense? And so to lock down and validation, these are some things you can use and try out to see how they work for you, for your apps. So a lot of your forms might have, a lot of your forms have email, phone number, try the email address and the name phone pad. And I don't know what the difference is between name phone pad and phone pad. I've not used those two, honestly, but it'd be interesting to find out what they do. And you can just select them and try it out, see what it does. Whenever you go to that text field, it'll show you. So I thought that'd be interesting to show you. So anyway, yeah, go ahead.
You can set the number of characters.
Number of which one now? Which one are you talking about?
And then mean font. Oh no.
Now. And the other things you can do here that you might play with is, like there might be some things that might be useful for. I've not used this much. I used in one app for capitalization, where it capitalizes by default words in bookcase. That way the user doesn't have to remember to caps the beginning of every word or beginning of every sentence. Sentences would be one. Capitalization of all characters might be one, where you want caps for sure. That's what you would use that for. It does have some corrections in here. If you do yes on this, you have to put in code for those corrections, what you want it to be. Spell check, they do have a default spell check. You can turn that off though if you don't want to mess with it, because sometimes it's kind of annoying. So anyway, just some of the stuff you can play with, but I wanted to show you the secure key and the keyboard type. All right, now let's do this. Go ahead and let's do a file, save, and then let's do an Xcode, quit Xcode. You're going to commit this to GitHub first before we do anything else. Commit what you've just done to your GitHub account. Make sure it's public and not private when you submit it so I can see it later. And the next thing you want to do is once you've committed your your code to GitHub as a public, put in your feedback on, do you understand how preferences work? And you can do a simple yes, or you can do a simple yeah, but, whatever you want to put in there, or no, don't get it. Whatever you want to do on your answer there, go ahead and do that for the in-class exercise once you commit your code and you exit out Xcode before you commit it to GitHub. After you commit to GitHub.
What was the Sunny Day
Yeah, it is here. Oh, that's the default list that they put in there on all of them. Yeah, that's just the default. They had a good question, which was, what was the default list on the UI scroll view? I'll bring mine up real quick while you guys are submitting yours. And because it's Apple, you probably noticed some of these names, right? From California, all California city. Mountain View, Sunnyvale, Cupertino, Santa Clara, San Jose. These are all just the default lists, the default names that show up on a UI scroll view or UI scroll. Okay, so that's what that's for. They called it scroll view for you. It's actually called UI picker view. UI picker view. So those are just default values that are in there. Good question. Okay, so commit that to GitHub and then commit your answer to week 10 in class. And then we're going to go over your take home. And I do want to, before you leave tonight, I'm going to come around and see how you're doing on your final lap. If you have any questions about your final lap, anything I can do to help you before you leave, that'd be great. And just kind of pick your brain on where you're at real quick. So once you've done the in-class, we'll go right into the take-home. And the in-class is just, do you understand how to use the picker view or the preferences within an app? So your homework basically is taking it one step further, building upon what you did tonight on the My Settings, My Preferences app, and you're going to build an app using NS User defaults. The user will enter a title, favorite event of the day, and select from a picker view and where it took place. An example would be work, home, and other. But you can put other things in there besides that if you want on the picker view. 2 text fields. You can do more than that if you want to, but at least 2 text fields for title and comment. A button for loading and saving. And then add whatever needed code you need for the loading and saving button. Commit to GitHub and submit below. Final option for your final app. Add an NS user default to your final app for user preferences, and then comment below where you implemented it at. You'll submit below the app title and message whatever the URL is to your GitHub, or if you want to commit your zip file, if it's not that large, I'd rather have your GitHub URL though to your final app than a zip file, just because I think it's safer to have your code to be published to GitHub before I see it. And so just kind of let me know where you put it at. That way I can look at it. Now, let's say your code's not compiling yet and you just put the code in there to use, but it's not really working yet. That's fine. Just let me know where you're putting it at and what you're going to do for it. So you throw a view on there and you put some fields on there for your preferences form. And you say, here's where I'm putting it at. It's not yet working. That's fine. Doesn't have to work. I just want to know that you're implementing it in your final app. Make sense? Because at this point, I don't expect anything to work on your final app right now. Okay? You're just putting it together, the shell of your engine, the shell of your Porsche, your body. You're just putting the frame together here. And so, would it be beneficial to do both? Yeah, for sure, as always. But for sure, definitely, if you've already started your final app, I would say try to find somewhere in there that's going to be a user preference type thing for your app. And, I'm sure it's not going to be too hard to find one of a user preference type of detail for an app. If you don't have to think too hard generally to find one, whether it be even if it's just their name, their first and last name or something, I don't know. just something that you can start with anyway for right now, maybe add 2 more later. Does that make sense? So that's your homework. Add to what we did in class. Any questions on the homework assignment and the modification for your final app? Okay, well, let me walk around real quick then. I'm going to get with everybody one by one, actually. In fact, let's just do this, if you wouldn't mind. If you wouldn't mind coming up here, that'd be awesome. And if you have a laptop that you brought tonight, if you bring a laptop, bring it up with you, and we'll do it that way tonight as we're leaving. I just want to check. I'll have you come sit by me real quick, whoever wants to volunteer first, and we'll just go one by one. As soon as I'm done checking your